All right. Good afternoon, everyone. Um, it's afternoon here in Sydney, Australia. I'm not sure what time it is where you all are, um, but we'll just jump straight in. We've got a short amount of time, so we'll just jump straight into this session. Um, Today's session, or this session today, is looking at the Australian language travel market and how things are panning out in current environment of COVID and so on, and border closures. And look, as we all know, the impact of COVID's been pretty severe, and the language travel industry has been hit pretty hard. Um, it's certainly true for Australia's English language sector as a whole, and the language travel sector in particular. And sadly, we've seen a few great colleges close their doors, but most are holding strong and looking to the future and are hopeful. And we have the benefit of coronavirus cases in Australia being very low, and strong economic stimulus by the government keeping businesses open and operating. Um, but at the same time, cases in other countries and the situation in other countries is not so positive. And lots of Australia's source markets where our students come from are certainly being hard hit. Western Europe, Latin America, um, in particular. Um, so the sector in Australia is likely to be waiting for a while yet before our next round of arrivals into the country, even with vaccines starting to appear. So today we're going to hear from three industry experts about their views on how things are shaping up and shifting in the Australian market, and some of the concerns and opportunities that they see for the coming 12 to 24 months. So if I can just introduce everyone, we've got Aparna Jacobs. Aparna is the Director of Studies of Language Programs at the University of New South Wales, one of Australia's top unis. She's also on the board of directors of English Australia, which is our English language sector peak body. We've got Giselle Resende, and she's the managing director in Australia for EC English, the global English language provider. They've got 24 centres globally. I'm sure you're aware of them. And Giselle is also on the board of English Australia. And lastly, we've got Simon Costain, who's the general manager of Go Study Australia. They're the student recruitment agent. They've got offices in Italy, Spain, France, and across Latin America. And they're one of our top sources of students, especially European students. And Simon's also got years of experience on the marketing side in colleges as well. And I'll be the host for the session. I'm Ian Aird. I'm the CEO of International Education Initiatives. And we're a strategy and management consulting firm that works with colleges and peak bodies and government bodies and investors and helps them get positive outcomes. So I'm just going to jump straight in with my first question, and I'll get Simon to speak first, and then Giselle. So the first question for the session is, with current travel restrictions in place, many colleges are looking at sales of online learning programs as vital revenue streams. Simon, do you feel there's the viable market for these programs for Australian colleges? And if so, do you feel there's a risk of focusing marketing on these online programs that it might negatively impact Australia's core value proposition of study in Australia?
Yeah, right. Well, when we think about English language travel, I break it down into those that are studying for an academic purpose, maybe they want to go to university, and those that are coming out for the experiential purpose of living and working in Australia. Given our core market is the working holiday market, I'm just going to focus on that second cohort for the moment because that's more related to the group of questions. And to be honest, I think there is an opportunity, but for a select group of colleges, because most colleges aren't going to invest enough time, energy, and resources into making the experience what it needs to be in order to replace the physical presence in Australia. Why would a student pay $200 a week to basically have Zoom classes with a college in Australia when they're based in Italy, when there are companies that have built their language learning from a electronic and e-space from the ground up, and offer a far superior experience. And what I believe is going to happen is you're going to have a handful of those colleges or even those startups that have that digital mentality. They're going to rise to the top very, very quickly. They're going to have enormous investment in their online programs and their user experience and their engagement. And the rest of the colleges that are just running Zoom classes and have that face-to-face mentality but are trying to do it digitally, they're going to get left behind. So when you look at why do people come to study in Australia, the whole concept is that experience in Australia. You strip that out and you're left with a pure online language school. And then you're competing against everybody else in the world. And I tell you what, out of the hundreds of language schools in Australia, very few of them are doing anything beyond Zoom meetings. So the schools that are going to need to, if you want to make a go of this, you're going to need to go back to basics and treat this as effectively an online startup from scratch. Think about the apps that you engage with the most. There's gamification, there's massive data analytics, there's reward points, there's bonuses. It's not just sitting in front of a screen and talking to other people. So the innovation hasn't been seen yet, and because we haven't had time. Most colleges just made a very quick shift within the space of weeks, and are yet to determine whether they're going to continue on that trajectory or not. Yeah. It's very, very likely that language travel itself will be non-existent in 2021 for new entrants into Australia. So a language school is going to need to make that determination. Do I make that investment and do I make that commitment and go big, or do we just bide our time and perhaps hibernate? Again, I mentioned this concept of people come here for Australia, to live in Australia, to meet Australians. If that's still your main pitch, we're an Australian language school, how are you going to bring that Australian experience into the online space? And aside from Australian teachers, of which there are very few, because most of them are from overseas, there hasn't been any innovation in there to really pitch any school as an innovative Australian experience. So one of the things that you're going to need to start looking at is bringing that an exceptional user experience into that making. Otherwise, you're competing against apps that are $10, $20 a month for a very, very good experience. Now, as an agent, I have no interest in selling a course at $10 or $20 a month because I can't sustain my business on that. I'd much rather be selling a course at $300 a week and facilitating that experience. So if you're going to go online, the agent channel is probably not going to sustain you either because agents aren't going to really be there supporting it. I think there's going to be a lot of challenges. That you're going to see a lot of schools that are trying to do full online. There is a medium in between, and I believe we'll talk about that sort of hybrid model as we move further in this session. But we're going to really struggle to sell Australian language if it's just an online course, because there really isn't that connection to Australia. That's my honest opinion.
Yeah. Okay. Thanks. I mean, that's yeah. You've not pulled any punches there, and it's really straightforward though. I mean, you've made some really good points. Giselle, can I pass to you, because I know you guys have got a fair bit of experience in the online space. Would you like me to restate the question, or are you good?
Can you please? It's just because
And Ian, can you speak a bit closer to the microphone? You're a bit soft.
Yep.
Thanks.
So the question was, Giselle, with current travel restrictions in place and colleges looking at sales of online learning programs as vital revenue streams, do you feel there's a viable market for these programs for Australian colleges? And if so, do you feel that there's a risk that focusing marketing efforts on online programs might negatively impact the core value proposition of study in Australia?
Ian, I think I will start uncoupling these two issues. Online is not instead of face-to-face. Those are two different things. And I believe online teaching is here to stay. Why? What is happening for us, in particular, I use my example at EC, what is happening for online teaching, it's simply an enabler for the students to start their study journey until they can come here. I shouldn't come to study in Australia or any other destination the culture, the context is part of it. It's a great driver for that student to go overseas. Language is one component of it. But what is this time is teaching us that they can start that journey, they can start that study journey until they can come to our country, until it's safe to do so. This is one side that we seeing of the online teaching, is not instead of. But another part is also we are reaching a sector of the market that they can't afford to travel, but they very much enjoy being on a class with students from all over the world. So we're reaching a market that they going overseas is not a possibility. It's financially, but being that multicultural environment online, it's been quite attractive. And funny enough, on a point that Simon's seeing, what we're seeing at EC is a greater engagement of agencies selling online products. When we first launched the online product in March, most of the agents were saying, no, I don't think this is a product for us. And then we went direct, alumni and so forth. But now we're seeing a considerable part of our online sales for online products done through the channel, through the agency channel, because there is a big understanding that this online product is an enabler for those students to start their journey and then come to the country when they're able to do so. So I think it's important when we talk about this to really uncouple those two issues or those two scenarios. They can be very much complementary to each other.
And if I can just jump in there and follow on from Gisele, when I was talking about connection to the Australian experience, that's exactly what Gisele and the EC team have managed to uncouple. It's that first step. For a school to be pure online without that intention to travel, they're going to need to do something pretty spectacular. Because if you think about how long a person needs to learn English to get proficient, they can't sit in a Zoom meeting for 20 hours a week for 40 weeks. They're going to need something else. So if the intention to travel is there, then it's an amazing enabler. But if they're going to just go, we are an online school, and that's what we're shifting our proposition from that in classroom focus, you're going to need to do something amazing, whether it's virtual reality, physical meetups in your host country, having a study buddy somewhere else in the world to change things up. Because online, as we know it as pure online, I think is going to be a very difficult proposition without that connection to travel.
Okay. All right. I might switch to Aparna now, because I think University of New South Wales sits in a unique position of often being a pathway to the university, very premium university programs, and so students are quite focused on getting to their university program. And I wonder if you might have a different perspective on this, but do you feel that students are now seeing online or blended, hybrid programs as the new standard, this new standard kind of course for the future?
Thanks, Ian. And I'm definitely going to be building on what Simon and Gisele have said so far. And while they were talking about the experiential part of the learning process for these particular students, I'm definitely in the pathway camp. So I might just talk a little bit about, in answering your question about are these courses online here to stay, from a pathway perspective, I would also tend to say yes. And I might just use our example. Over this year, I started looking at our data from March 2020. We've had unique enrollment of about 3,700 students. We are in decline like everybody else. We're facing the same issues as every other provider, but I think that's a very substantial number.
Yeah.
When I started digging into what this number actually means, and not surprisingly, the majority of them were pathway students heading to some of those courses you mentioned. These are students on pathway to degree programs, diplomas. It could be foundation students, again, on a pathway to UNSW. a very, very small percentage was general English students. So this actually is now feeding into a theory we're developing about who these students are, who sees value in these courses. Not surprisingly, the sector reflects similar trends. A depressed market as far as ELICOS only students go, and they're in a bit of a holding pattern until borders open. But debt, for example, is seeing a 4.5% increase. And again, these facts are again formulating a theory for us. So here's what's happening. I think this is my read of what I'm seeing with these numbers. There is an appetite for pathway students because their intention to keep on track as far as their study plans, life plans, career plans go is extremely strong. And this has created that market. There is also a very high expectation for us to continue offering these long after borders open, long after we return to whatever the new normal is going to be. So for that reason, we will continue offering some of these courses like other providers will well into the future. I just want to go back to Simon's point about the value proposition, and what we're seeing moving forward, according to just what Gisela and Simon have said, is a further segmentation of this online market, and also a segmentation in terms of the onshore, so in Australia experience versus the online student. These courses have a very, very different profile. So the students who study online, their needs and their aspirations are very different compared to the student that wants to come, stay in Australia, immerse themselves in that experience. You can't put a price on it, or you can put a price on it, and it's going to be a premium price.
Yeah.
I think that's how I would see it as well.
Okay. All right. I might come back to this one further in a second, but can I ask you as well, because some of the listeners aren't from Australia, and they may not be aware, but Australia has fairly strict controls around face-to-face study. So if you're on a working holiday or a tourist visa, then you're fine. But the vast majority come on a student visa, and if you're on a student visa, you must be studying face-to-face 20 hours a week.
Yeah.
How do you feel colleges are going to work with the government to either enable these programs or to allow, whether it's online or hybrid, to happen in that regulatory context?
Yeah, I think that's a really interesting question, Ian. And I'll give you a reference in a minute. But I think my approach to that question is really looking at the differences between what an online course needs and what a face-to-face course needs. And they're quite different. There are some very specific points of difference. So for example, the teaching and learning experience online, completely different to what you do face-to-face. The way a student spends time with teachers and their peers compared to self-study time and reflection time, practice time, very different. How assessments are done, very different. Don't need a visa because you're not traveling, again, good point. The question scale is an interesting one because you're no longer dictated by the space in a classroom. And the final, with a bit of interference, the final point around this is really the fact that how we assess these students online is extremely different to how we would assess them in the traditional pen and paper exam type of course. Given these points, right? And sorry, one more important point is these courses straddle different time zones because that's the opportunity we have. Attendance kind of becomes a bit meaningless in that context. So given these points and making the regulators and the government aware of these points is going to be a crucial part of how we move forward. Already through shutdown, we have seen the government supply best practice in teaching and learning, agree to flexibility in assessment systems, and therefore we can have these conversations with the regulator. I know that in a couple of English Australia will be organizing a roundtable with regulators. So we can really talk with them on agreeing to these points of difference, the national code provisions in Australia, which are mainly intended to protect students. The reference I was going to give you was comparing our online offerings to a T&E model, a transnational education model, which is not a new conversation for us as well. I'll just stop there. We can come back to it later.
Okay. Yeah, look, more really interesting points, and I think we could just stick to this one topic and go all day. But I'll jump ahead to my next question. And Gisele, I'll pass to you. It seems to be a sound problem. I'm not sure where it's coming from.
Yeah, I think if anyone is not speaking, if we mute our microphones, it might solve it.
Might help. All right. So, Gisele, we all know that many of Australia's language travel source countries have been massively impacted by COVID in terms of lives, in terms of the economy, in terms of employment, and so on. And that's going to have a knock-on effect to demand for language travel. At the same time, student acquisition costs have certainly increased, and delivery costs in Australia are very high and always rising. As colleges and agents prepare for borders to reopen and the industry to get up and running again into maybe the second half of next year, where do you feel we need to focus efforts to ensure a sustainable and profitable market? Are there ways to cut costs or improve value proposition that can deal with these situations?
This is very interesting here. And then we're saying a way of cut costs or increase the value proposition. I think this is an opportunity to innovate, an opportunity to do things that we've been talking about for many, many years, but we haven't done it. I'll give you a basic example. Brochures. Since I've been in this industry for the last 10 years, every school say, why do we spend $250,000 a year in printing brochures? Because my competitor prints a brochure, because my other competitor prints a brochure. You know what? No, nobody's printing brochures next year. So that's a way of, yes, cutting costs, but also a way of innovating. Another part I think that we're going to really innovate and change the way we do is visits to market. Okay, we had that thing, we got to go to the market 6 times a year so we can maintain the relationship. I do believe face-to-face contact is critical. But what we're going to have to understand the balance is what is that balance? Is that once a year? And then we're really going to have to reinvent how we do the training with our agencies network, how we engage with the agency network. So I think we're going to have to be a huge shift on more videos, more interactive training material, so we can really cut the travel costs, cut the brochures, but not necessarily reduce the student experience or the quality of the education. I think those are key points. Having the courage to do things that we've been talking about for a long time. And third one, as this market rebuilds, a very important point will have to be the collaboration in the sector. How, as independent language schools, how do we support each other until business numbers build up again, and then we can have a healthy business on our own? I had very interesting conversations with my competitors.
I think we've lost Gisele.
We can support each other when numbers are growing, because numbers will start again very small. So I believe the focus is not necessarily in cutting costs. The focus is innovation and collaboration. We cannot do what we have been doing.
Yeah.
That's where our energy needs to go.
All right. Simon, can I pass to you? I mean, how do you feel about colleges not giving you brochures?
I'm one of the world's biggest advocates about not using brochures. I think it's a complete waste of time and money, and students just don't read them. they don't read them. Giselle's comments terrify me because that means there's going to be no more free dinners for our agency staff when the schools come to visit. It's the only reason I became an agent. I think this is such an interesting question because we've all got businesses that were operating at the peak of the market, and we've got staff who are expensive. We've got experienced managers, teachers who are on the highest pay bracket. And that was fine when we were running at maximum capacity. But we are going to be coming back into effectively startup mode, and there will be a trickle of students. It's very clear from what the government is saying that when things restart, higher ed students get the preference, not language students. And those of us in language travel are going to see a trickle of students possibly at the end of 2021, and it will take 3 to 4 years to rebuild. What do we do to keep our staff? I've got managers who are absolutely amazing, but there's going to be not enough business for them. So we have to actually go back and relook at our business model as well. While Giselle is saying, don't cut the student experience, but look at where you can cut costs, that's exactly what everybody's going to need to do. I've started putting offers out to my competitors as well. Come and share office space with us. Let's share marketing costs. Let's share resources, because I've now got a 200 square meter office that literally has 3 people in it. So why don't we all start a collaborative space? I know Giselle's having, she cut out at the time when she was talking about it, but she's started collaborating and sharing campus space with some of her competitors as well. That's actually a real tangible demonstration of what the word collaborate means. Collaborate's often very loosely thrown around. We are going to have to make concessions. It's not about dropping commissions. It's not about resetting those commissions because acquisition costs are still high, but it's actually about rewarding on results and throwing a lifeline to each other to make sure we get through this. And a perfect example is we work with some schools that only deliver ELICOS in Australia. They're suffering right now. As part of our marketing, our business model, we've charged what we call a key partner fee. So for us to represent you, we charge you a fee every single month. I've reached out to some of our ELICOS only partners and said, you know what, let's just put it on ice. We can't deliver what we used to deliver. You need that money desperately just to get through, and I want you to survive. So we renegotiate and we go back to the table when we all come out of this on the other side. And I think it takes mature, sensible business negotiations and discussions to work out where do we want to be and how we're going to get there. Yeah. A couple of other points. I really want to push colleges maintain sensible pricing structures. Now is not the time to drop pricing, because if you do, we all start at the bottom. And in Australia, we're starting to see some really disturbing behavior from colleges. There was one college that released a flyer the other day saying, name your own price. We will not reject any sensible offer. Yeah. What does that mean? So we're now starting
to just let me jump in there for a second, Simon, because we do need to be a little bit careful that we're not telling people how to compete or,
yes.
Or pricing. There are
okay. Understood.
Careful.
Understood. But the point I'm trying to make is we don't need to drop pricing down to ridiculous levels. There is still enormous amount of interest in studying in Australia. There is a huge amount of students that are going to come here. So nobody wins if we all drop too low. We can't operate as businesses. So talk to your agents, talk about sensible pricing strategies, and let's all go to market and maintain a healthy industry. I'd also like to say that we do need to improve the experience. For years, colleges have complained, we have a commodity product. How do we be different? Do we do English plus Alpha? Do we do weekend tours? As Giselle said, now is the time to reset and do all the things that we thought, well, we don't have time to do this, because we have 12 months to rebuild your teaching and your student experience the way you want. What's that going to look like? Is there going to be AR and VR components? There's a school in France now that is a completely virtual campus. Could you take elements of that? Could you start now hooking up with primary schools who are trying to improve their English as well and start having digital interactions with kids who've never met a Spanish person before? It's time to innovate and start thinking, what are we going to do that's beyond a face-to-face classroom experience to really bring that Australian value proposition in? Because Australia is the #1 destination because of Australia. not because of what happens in the classroom, because of what happens outside the classroom. So let's leverage that and go back to basics and make it the best it can possibly be.
Yeah, great, cool. And I'll pass the same question to you, Aparna. How do you see this conundrum?
I think, and the conundrum being, let's remind our audience, the fact
the conundrum being
and sustainability.
Yeah, how do we keep the sector, financially viable when the source countries are going to be economically suffering, but the costs for agents and the costs for colleges certainly haven't gone down in any way, shape, or form.
Sure.
Do you see it more as a organizations need to become more efficient and cost cut? Do there need to be more significant changes, or is it more of a innovation and value prop?
I really love this question, and both Gisela and Simon have made some great points, and I wanted to just add to some of those as well. Now, maybe I'll start by saying, when we come out of this, if we come out of this, we're going to find ourselves in a new normal. So we are never going to go back to doing things the way they were. That's just not going to happen, because really it is for us to acknowledge and articulate the reality of the new normal, the opportunities of the new normal, and then find how we harness those. I think from my perspective, already the answers are in front of us. We spoke a little bit about agents and the budget for travel and so on, as Gisela mentioned. This used to be one of the major budget items in every organization, every school's kind of budget. Over the travel restrictions, we've had to find ways to innovate and empower agents differently, reach schools, parents, students very differently. So we started doing something quite, it's not even that high tech. We started doing webinars for agents. We started doing training sessions online. We set up portals with tools to equip our agents to really do what they do really well and support the students and support us. There was so much need to communicate information because change was happening so quickly. And we did all this really well, achieved massive scale at a fraction of the price. So it can be done is one example. The next one is about the opportunity presented through these online courses that we keep talking about. Never before has the reach been so fantastic. We keep talking about not investing only in China. Where are the diversity markets? Where's the new market? Is it Africa? Scale, price, all of those things. It's happening now. And it's been on our wish list for a long time. And we have done it. 10 days, 10 years innovation in 10 days, etc. So why not keep going with that? The benefits of that are going to be, or the fallout or an opportunity of that is going to be more direct recruitment, perhaps, direct pipelines to whatever receiving destinations. And so there are some fallouts because the landscape is shifting. Just in terms of the sustainability, I feel also we shouldn't ever forget that student experience piece that Simon and Gisela mentioned already. Now, the punchline, if there is one, is the fact that student experience is going to look very different in an online course and a face-to-face course. And we've agreed that both of these realities will exist moving forward. The other punchline is the fact that student experience and investment in student experience doesn't need to be millions of dollars. To me, I see it as an essential fundamental mind shift in customer service and how you approach a customer, how you understand the need, all those basic 101 principles that we need to keep front and center in dealing with students. So for example, I would be urging my teachers to start looking from an individual perspective, me as a manager, our organization, our sector, our states, and the federal government. It's for all of us to discuss and agree on an approach for customer service for students coming to Australia. Because let's not forget, these students pumped $40 billion into our economy in 2019. Well, this year wasn't spectacular, but they are coming. They will come at some point. What's our plan for them? The economic reality you're talking about, which is true for other countries, definitely true for Australia. And this is going to, if students are not front and center in these conversations, it's going to cripple our ability to provide infrastructure for when they come back. So it's in our interest to keep those conversations alive. And I think peak bodies like English Australia have their work really cut out for them to keep that lobbying, keep that pressure up on the government. Those headlines, whether they're positive or negative about our students, they're in the headlines. And that's, I think, an important sign.
Aparna, I really like that line that student experience is
fantastic point. Sorry. I think you wanted to say something there, Simon.
Don't I just said it. I do want to just jump in and say this is also an opportunity for people to get out of the industry. We have reached a point where many schools are unsustainable because of incredibly low margins, because there's so much competition out there and there's so little differentiation. A school should really, and even agencies, to be honest, should really look and say, can I survive the next, let's call it 24 months with minimal students? And if you can't, exit gracefully, do the right thing, let your students go so that they still get a great experience, and give whatever refunds you need. But if everyone holds on, there's going to be even more carnage, and it will be the students who suffer because they don't get their refunds. Agents who owed money will go out of business as well. So I think there needs to be a very mature business analysis to be made. And we all thought this was going to last a couple of months. It's now clear that even if COVID and a vaccine comes through in the next 9 months, we're not going to have a return to normal for 4 to 5 years. So can you survive the next 2 years until numbers start to increase again? Yeah. In your work, you've seen many businesses that don't even know they're losing money. Imagine how they're going now.
Yeah. Look, I think you've all made really spot on comments about this, and talking about collaboration is key. And Simon, you've put another facet to that collaboration that colleges need to collaborate to put the students' needs first. Carrying on from what Aparna was just saying, and making sure that that students are looked after before anything else. But look, let me continue that line of thinking with another question, and I'll start again with you, Simon.
Yep.
And Aparna put a comment out there in her last response to this effect. But one of the impacts of COVID is that it's trained the world. The world has spent $2 trillion training itself on how to use video conferencing, and look at us here. And that has changed the way we engage and interact, and it's changed who we can engage and interact with. How do you feel this shift is going to play out over the coming years with language travel sales and marketing? And how do you feel it's going to affect the role of agents and the relationship between colleges and agents?
Great question. I think the role of agents is proven to be stronger than ever during this period, because we were the people that they turned to when things went wrong, and we could speak the language. We were there to offer 24-hour support, not just support up until business hours when the college closes. Aparna referenced that there is an opportunity for increased direct recruitment, which for most agents would be a terrifying prospect, but there can be a healthy mix of both as well. And if anything, it has trained the customer to, I guess, rely less on the agency, because they've got more time, there's more resources for them to look at what they want to study. Previously, what would happen, and it still does in most cases, a student will come to an agency and ask for suggestions on what schools they want to travel to, and then the agent will enroll them. I see it very much now that as a student will research their own institutions and come to the agency and said, here's the 3 that I'm interested in, can you tell me about them and why? So for this reason, schools are going to need to up their game. They're really going to need to up their digital marketing presence. They're going to need to update their marketing materials, because some of them are absolutely shocking right now. They're going to need to update the value proposition that they put out if they want to compete. If you do a Google review, you just type in number of different colleges from higher education all the way down to language schools in Sydney. Some of them have absolutely shocking Google reviews, even though we know that the experience that they deliver is a positive experience, because people will generally write a review if they're unhappy, and very rarely write a review if they are happy. So digital reputation management, I think, is actually the first principle that every single school should start looking at, is how do we get our happy customers to spread the word to other happy customers? Because word of mouth, we know, is the most powerful sales tool. And then agents can facilitate the sales process along that journey. For me as an agent right now, if I recommend a school and that student goes and looks at their Google review and it's got a bad review, it damages my reputation. It makes the student question, why should I study at this place? So we are now stopping working with colleges that have poor marketing materials, poor student reviews, limited testimonies. We need as much evidence for the student that this is the right choice for them as possible. And this is only going to be amplified by COVID because people are now used to finding the information for themselves. And we are placing ourselves as an agent at a different stage of the sales cycle. Sorry, Ian, I can't hear you. You might have muted yourself.
Mute.
There we go.
I muted myself. I had a plane going overhead. I was saying, Giselle, did you want to add anything to that last question?
I think a very important point on how that relationship will change is on a strategic level. You know, how many times with Simon or my key agents, I'll go and let's have a conversation about our strategic plan for the next 12 months or for the next 18 months. We are in a very volatile environment. I think the strategies will need to be nimble and agile. Schools and agencies will need to look at pockets of opportunities in terms of source market and destination market, where there is a business opportunity, because we might see markets closing, markets going lockdown. And having concise and nimble strategies that we can review every quarter is the way forward. Yeah, we might have a bigger strategic plan, but we need to have very tangible tactical outcomes, because the landscape of opportunity might change very quickly, and you need to be ready for this.
Okay. All right. So look, I might just throw it to the audience now, if I can, and just say, if anyone has any questions for the panel, please post them into the chat box now, and I'll do my best to share those with the guys and see if we can't get their response. And while we wait for that, I might just throw out a general question to the group and see if there's anything else that any of you feel that we haven't touched on that is central to this in terms of either innovation or exciting opportunities that you see coming out of it that we haven't covered yet.
Not so much innovation, but just some points of consideration that we need to look at. And one of those is the ability of staff to work from home. Now, when I look at your backgrounds, you have nice professional backgrounds. I know some of my sales managers don't have that luxury, and they're having sales meetings literally on their bed. It's not a professional background. We're dealing with it as a short-term measure, but if there is an expectation that staff are going to work from home, particularly people-facing staff like sales agents, we're going to need to look at, well, how can we support those staff to have a professional environment to carry out their work? Because let's face it, you don't want to buy a course from somebody who's taking a meeting on their bed. Myself, I had to come into the office, so I had a study banner in the background. But I do encourage agents and schools to invest in, or start considering investing in. This is not a short-term change. This is long-term now. So we need to equip our staff with the right laptops, so they're not working from their own computers. They need to have a professional background. They need to have networking and meeting materials. We're going to need to really start thinking about how do we have our business work from home. And that's a real game changer for the concept of an education advisor. For years, a benchmark of quality has been an agency has an office. And it's something that we at GoStudy have invested heavily in. We've got 16 offices around the world, which are very expensive. And we could go to a university or a college and say, we are a good agency because we spend this amount on offices. The new normal is you can work from home with a laptop and a mobile phone. And that was the classic definition of a dodgy agent. So what is a dodgy agent now? Because the game has changed. And so it's going to be really, really interesting for agencies who don't have an office to reposition themselves as a benchmark of quality, to maintain that reputation for students and schools. And I don't have the solution, but I know it's something that needs a lot of consideration.
Yeah, really good point. Aparna, was there anything that you wanted to throw in?
I think the reputation conversation, is actually relevant at every level, from every angle. We're talking about individuals as professionals, and over 2020, teachers, managers, everyone has invited students from around the world into their homes, their kitchens, their bedrooms, because there's no other space to teach. Now, I think there is a level of understanding across an emergency response. And to add to Simon's point, we do need to think this through if this is going to become official. Yeah. I also feel the reputation conversation goes beyond our homes into our communities and into the country. So, for example, are we already on the front foot with planning for when these students return, making sure that their welfare needs are looked after? The community is treating them not with suspicion, but welcoming them. So what's the support structures in place for all of us to integrate these students into the community and not be accusing these students to be the next wave of coronavirus or some such thing? Australia needs to be welcoming. And I think we are largely, because over the year we have put out, or the government has made initiatives. They might have been a bit slow, I have to admit, but flexibility in visa arrangements, best practice guides on student mental health and well-being from English Australia's side, a real concentrated effort in understanding student needs and responding to these needs. So there have been initiatives, because I think we're in it for the long haul and not for short-term gains. Let's just maybe keep those areas in mind as well as we talk about reputation across the board and what makes Australia inviting.
Aparna, that's such an important point. Giselle and I were at a conference in Canberra on Tuesday, and 2 international students spoke. And one of their main grievances was over 2 years, they hadn't met an Australian, and they found it very difficult to become friends with Australians. Now, if you're studying online, even in Australia, but as a part of a hybrid model and you're at home, your ability to get out and meet Australians is reduced even further. And I think there is a real opportunity for schools to start innovating here and integrating Australian experiences into the education a lot more. Again, don't have the answers, but the schools that nail that are going to be the ones that really excel and that we as agents are going to want to promote.
I think that's a long-standing one that's been dying for someone to take it and own it.
But can I just add one thing? I think it's also important to talk about the staff, because Simon said, okay, we're gonna be a startup mode. Okay, so what do we do? Like, do we revisit our week? Are we spreading the hours we have across the staff? And is the 4-day week the new norm? So we have reduced hours, but then we have enough work for a bigger number of people. So I think we need to start to also look what our working week looks like when things start to reopen, and having those conversations with staff. I do a lot of town halls with my staff in the region, with teachers. I have teachers that came to me, Giselle, I've been teaching for 20 years. What am I going to do? And I'm truly passionate about what I do. So one of the things we're trying to do is that how can we spread hours across to the maximum number of people we can? Yeah. So business have to look what the people strategy moving forward will be. And that is equally important if you're working from home or not.
Yeah, look, really good point, and a good one to end on. None of us would be where we are without the staff that make things happen, and with the students. And so you've all really focused on value to the students and meeting the students where they are, and giving value there, and that's a really important message too. Thank you all. Fantastic answers. Been fascinating to listen for me. I hope the audience has enjoyed it too. And thanks everyone for hope you have a great day. Thanks, guys.
Thanks, guys.
Thank you. Thank you, guys. Thank you, Ian.